Welcome to the Sports Phenom Show for Week 5 of your MLS action. I'm going to give you out another 3 best bets here for this weekend. Through 4 weeks, I'm already rolling with a 7-3, 70% winning ratio on fire to start the year. Of course, you didn't expect anything less from the number one handicapper, number one professional gambler in the industry, your one and only source, the Phenom, getting it done once again. Let's keep it going here this week. First game I want to take a look at here this weekend is the New York Red Bulls. They're going to be hosting the Toronto FC. Both teams not off to the best of starts, although New York Red Bulls not too bad, sitting in 10th place. They do have 2 draws with a win, only 1 loss thus far for 5 points. Toronto, on the other hand, hasn't won a match yet. Best game was their first one with a 2-2 draw in DC, and they've lost all 3 other games, losing 4-2 to Orlando, 2-0 to FC Cincinnati, and last week at home 2-1 to Chicago. New York historically in this series does very well against Toronto, and I expect that to continue here in this matchup. They're unbeaten against Toronto in the last 4 matchups with 3 wins in those games, and they're especially tough at home, where they remained unbeaten here to start the season. I expect that to continue here in this one, going up against one of the worst defensive teams in the league in Toronto, who, by the way, have an absolute plethora of injuries heading into this one. 4 starters, including Sigurd Rostad, Raul Petretta, Henry Ringo, and Larici Larea, all out of action. They also have 3 players out due to international duty, and Tyrese Spicer, who's playing for Trinidad and Tobago. We have Jonathan Osorio, the captain of Toronto FC, also missing for this matchup, playing for Canada, and also Debbie Flores, who was named to the Honduran national team. On top of all that, if that's not all bad enough for Toronto, Ola Brinzenston, their pickup from the Norwegian national team, center forward, was a late scratch last week due to an injury in practice, so they had to put in substitute DeAndre Kerr in for him. So they are in an absolute mess of a situation. It looks like the B team will be playing for Toronto in this one. So New York is the play for me in this one. You're getting a great line. I think it started at minus 130. It's gone up, understandably, now to minus 150. This looks like the best bet of the weekend, if you ask me. I see no way that Toronto spoils New York's party and remains unbeaten at home, and they run up the standings, climb up a little bit after this win. Take the New York Red Bulls, your first of 3 MLS best bets for this weekend. Next game, I'm looking at the matchup between Orlando City at home playing against DC United. DC United off to a surprising unbeaten start to the season. They picked up a win in week 3 over Sporting Kansas City 2-1, and all 3 other matchups were draws. Last week they drew at home to CF Montreal. Also had a 2-2 draw in week 2 against Chicago Fire. And the first game of the season they were able to draw against Toronto FC. Toronto scored a late goal there, so they almost had another win in that game. Playing in Orlando, who's off to a, I'd say, disappointing start. First loss came in week 1 of the season against Philadelphia, who beat them pretty bad, 4-2. They were able to rebound the following week against Toronto FC, although not much to be too excited about their beating a Toronto FC team that hasn't even won a game yet this year. Then they lost a close one in New York, 2-1, with a draw last week, a decent result in New York against the Red Bulls, 2-2. When I take a look at this game, I had bigger expectations for Orlando City, and when I look at who DC has played this year thus far to get that unbeaten record, as mentioned, Toronto FC, Chicago Fire with only one win, Sporting Kansas City, who in the Western Conference also hasn't won a game yet, and last week they drew against CF Montreal, another team that hasn't won a game. So right there, 3 of their 4 matchups this season have been against teams that haven't even won a game. So how impressive is that? Not at all. Nothing really, to be honest with you. And their one win, as mentioned, came against Sporting Kansas City, one of those 3 teams that doesn't have a win. So, folks, I'm not impressed with DC's results at all. If anything, they should be 4-0 playing those teams that are struggling thus far to start the year. And I think this is a spot they get their first loss. Orlando, hungry, has played a much better, stronger schedule against Philadelphia, who currently sits at second in the Eastern Conference. They've played New York City, who's also higher up in the standings. So I like Orlando to get a win in this game. They should be able to handle DC United without any problems. I expect a big performance from them. They're coming off that 2-2 draw against the New York Red Bulls last week. They're looking for a much better performance here at home after that first loss against Philly. And they weren't overly impressed, even though they were victorious against Toronto in that second game. So I expect their biggest and best performance thus far at home in this game against a DC United who's lucky to have squeezed by those first 4 games without a loss. Take Orlando City. This is your second of 3 MLS best bets for week number 5. Next game, and this will be my final selection for week 5 MLS best bets. I'm taking a look at the game between Nashville SC and the winless CF Montreal. Well, Nashville's pulled off a couple big wins here in the last couple of weeks, beating the previous unbeaten Philadelphia Union last week in Philadelphia 3-1. And they picked up a win prior to that at home against the Portland Timbers. So they now stand at 2 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss in the season, 7 points. Has them in 5th in the Eastern Conference standings. CF Montreal still continues to look for their first win, but they've been battling. Remember, this is a team that has to start the season with 7 straight away games, which is absolutely crazy. But let's take a look at their results. They played a very close 3-2 loss in Atlanta in the first game of the season. That's a tough place to play in week 1. Then if that wasn't bad enough, they had to go to Minnesota, another tough place to play, and also had only a 1-0 close loss in that matchup. They then had to go to the red-hot Vancouver Whitecaps, who are an absolute surprise here this year. 4-0 to start the season, and they have been on absolute fire, even winning their CONCACAF Champions Cup games. So to lose only 2-0 there, not too bad. Decent performance, and they kept that close all the way down to the end. And then were able to pull their first draw of the season last week against DC United 0-0. So I like the fight that CF Montreal has been putting in. I think Nashville here will take this game a little bit lightly coming off those 2 big ones. It's a little bit of a letdown game for them, especially coming off that 3-1 win in Philadelphia last week. And with the desperation of CF Montreal looking to get their first victory of the season, this is a great spot to take CF Montreal, especially with the line. Look at it. We could take them at +1.5. And just like we did last week, we were able to allow ourselves a 1-0 loss or a 1-goal loss. We didn't even need it. We ended up getting the draw, and I see the same type of result here in this one, a draw. At worst case, CF Montreal keeps it again close, and I don't see them losing any more than by 1 goal. So another solid best bet here on CF Montreal. Nashville has a letdown in this game. CF Montreal desperately seeking their first win, should fight hard enough to at least get a draw. No worse than a 1-goal loss, and maybe even surprise with an outright upset. Sprinkle a little there on the money line. So those are my 3 MLS Week 5 best bets. Okay, to quickly recap my 3 best bets for MLS Week 5 action. The New York Red Bulls, you're looking at a line anywhere between 130 and 150. Next selection on Orlando City. You're looking at a line at around laying 130 there on that one. And finally, Montreal Impact. Take them plus the 1.5 to keep this one close. Folks, I see no reason we don't at least put 2 out of these 3 in the win column. Maybe we'll sweep the board once again. Let's keep rolling, folks. That's it for this weekend. I am the Phenom. Let's get this money. See ya.